Hello, Gareth Lock. Thanks for coming to us all the way from Belgium today.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Thanks for the invite, and thanks very much to Ashley for introducing us.
Yeah, so Ashley Buggy is kind of the theme of the month because she's been on the show a few different times with all of her expeditions, and she brings fascinating people to me like you. And so it's good to have you here. One of the things that we've talked about in detail with Ashley is the different expeditions she's done, which involves scuba diving. And so I thought, let's have someone on the show who can tell us what it takes to scuba dive. And I have people in my life, my partner, in fact, who's a scuba diver. He's probably dived more than 1,000 times, especially in the San Juan Islands. And I just need to understand a little bit more to think that I might someday do it. So let's talk about
Yeah,
that.
sure.
Let's also mention that you have a podcast called The Human Diver, and we'll get into that too. So how did you start out in diving, and why from the very start did it just feel like so safe and inviting to be under the water?
Um, so I first started dive 99 on holiday, wanted to go sailing, couldn't hire a boat, so decided to go diving. And I would dive in the morning and then we'd do stuff in the afternoon with my partner at that time. And I just loved being under the water from being a kid anyway. So just lots of swimming. So to go under and then see the sort of the underwater realm was fantastic. And so since then, I went through a whole series of training, and it wasn't until probably 2005 I had a near miss, and that's where my interest in safety in diving came as well. So, but it was at that stage I also realized that, as like many places in life, there are good trainers, there are good instructors, and there are others that you could probably avoid. And the difficulty is finding those. And I'm going to say fell in with a good crowd back in the UK. And then my training sort of took off, and I've probably done about 800 dives or so, and spent a lot of time working hard to get good in water skills so that actually I'm comfortable and doing a lot of photography and seeing wrecks and things. But, traveling the world, cold water environment, San Juan is a cold water environment, but dived in Egypt, the Mediterranean, Mexico, and just what you see under there is just different. It's quiet, it's still, nature is pretty amazing. So yeah, it's definitely a case of finding the right person.
Right.
And that's a difficulty when you're a novice because you don't know.
You don't know what to look for. Okay, so I'm going to back you up a little bit when you said you had a near miss, because that's what people, I don't want to focus on the negative, but when I hear that as someone who's reluctant to dive, I want to know what that is. And I want to know what you knew or what you'd learned or who you were with to make it just a near miss, not just, but to make sure you got it.
Totally.
Okay.
So I was with work. I was out in San Diego. I'd only got about 8 or 9 dives to my name. And I think this is one of the limiting factors. And one of the things that I'm a strong advocate for is actually more experience. The exposure, people don't necessarily understand the risks they're facing when they go diving. So I'm going to say, overconfident. I went diving, and as I jumped off the back of the boat, there was some rental gear, and one of the connectors came undone, which, wasn't a major issue. We started to descend down the anchor line to the wreck, and I realized I couldn't put any gas into my buoyancy device. Now, at that stage, I left the Air Force after 25 years in February 2015. So I was quite confident in my abilities, and I knew that the bottom was at 100 feet. So I wasn't going to sink any deeper than 100 feet, and that's what the plan was. So we hit the bottom, and we solved a problem, and it was a technical engineering issue. But actually, it's this piece that having the confidence and the forethought to sit there and go, you know what, it's not going to get massively bad from where I am. I had a buddy, we solved the problem, we swam around. And the reason why I got involved in the safety space is I wanted to tell people the story. I wanted to share with them how I solved the problem and how we improved, because that's how aviation is as safe as it is, because we share those stories and then people learn from others' mistakes, near misses, adverse events, or whatever. And then we all get better. And that's where I've been a huge advocate, is trying to create that culture of learning in the diving space.
Well, and one of the things too, you talk about really being calm. And I know from just conversations with people who are dive masters that if you're in a pool setting, even being trained, and you're someone who has a tendency to panic or a tendency to not, then they recommend you don't dive. That is just not a hobby or an interest that is safe for you. And I can see how, like, for example, this is an odd example, but I have a cousin who trained for a triathlon, and she trained for the swim part in a pool, and then ended up, the swim was in a lake, and she got in the water, and it never occurred to her to train in the lake, and she just panicked. And it set her off course. She didn't end up getting to do that part, or choosing to do that part of the training or the race. And so that's an example of how, it's one thing to be in a pool, having this instructor that hopefully is a good one, and then being out in the water. So obviously a first-time diver wouldn't go 100 feet if they didn't want to. But what is your recommendation for someone just starting out? The only way to get experience is to dive. So you're saying get experience. So what's the way to get experience so that when things like that happen, you have some sense of what to do next?
So I think one of the bit about experience is building it up slowly. And I think life in general and certain sports are very much about, hey, look at this. The GoPro culture, we see this, we want to go and do this, and we push the boundaries. And the way that diving is marketed as a safe, sexy, accessible sport to everybody, it's not. And it's that bit of having the mindset that sits there, I'm going to go and progress slowly. People go, right, I'm going to go and do my open water class. Can I take my camera with me? No. Why? Because it's going to limit your task awareness about what's going on. But they've got one, and I can set the pictures. It's like, it doesn't matter. And so there is this conflict between the commercial side of things and the fun sport things. So, I'm a strong advocate for certain organizations like Global Underwater Explorers who've got really high quality standards, and they cost a little bit more. And it's like, well, what's the difference? All of the training agencies are the same. They go, well, yes, they all align with standards, but then it's this bit of what's the minimum standard versus what's out there in terms of quality. And often paying a little bit more is worth it because actually it's life support equipment and training that you're getting. But if everybody's got the same badge and they're all offering the same course, the human nature piece, and that's why I teach a lot of the human factor stuff, human nature says the discriminator is price because they all do the same thing. But actually that's not necessarily the case.
Well, and you make a good point too when you're talking about the training and how so to me, what I hear you saying is if you have an instructor and you're an inexperienced diver and you ask a simple thing like, can I take my GoPro? And that instructor says yes, then that's probably not the instructor that you want to be putting your life in their hands as you navigate this new hobby or adventure, right?
Absolutely. And one of the challenges, we don't know what we don't know.
Yes.
And so we don't necessarily know the questions or more importantly, what the answers should be.
And that's true with anything that we take on, right? We just have to get experience, and we have to surround ourselves with people who know better than us, who are several. In this case, some things you teach, you only need to be a couple of steps ahead of the person. But in this case, you need to be way ahead of the person who has had so much experience to know exactly what to do in multiple situations. Let's take a quick break. I want to talk about your podcast, The Human Diver, and more about diving. I want people to know exactly what they would do today if there's someone who wants to dive, say, in Hawaii in December. Okay? We'll be back. We are back with you, Gareth. You have a podcast called The Human Diver, and I'm just going to pull it up here because when I was researching and listening to parts of it and reading the titles and the show explanations, so much of it sounds like it could be any topic, not just diving. For example, one episode, communication, what stops people from speaking up? The other one was mistakes are good. Learning from mistakes is sometimes better than getting it right. So I think so many things that we do are metaphor for life, but your podcast really talks about the mistakes we make, learning from those mistakes, and how it does. I mean, it could be about anything.
Absolutely. And so for the last 8 years, so 2016, 8 years, I've been teaching in a face-to-face environment, an online environment, human factors in diving. So where I've taken this from is aviation. So what I've done is taken high-risk industries and repackaged the theory and the stories and applied it into the diving space. But I also do it with media companies, with software companies. I'm working with, I'm in Belgium at the moment, some military divers, some mine clearance divers. People are people. It's just the stories that change. We're all wired broadly the same way. So how you make a decision in the diving space will be the same broadly in aviation or in healthcare or in oil and gas. And so what we do with the Human Diver and the podcast that's there with 100 and something episodes at the moment is actually just giving people small snippets, 5 to 15 minute long sections, which is really taking the blogs that we've written and put them in an audio format so people can listen and in effect take life lessons. Yes, the vehicle is diving, but the topic is how to make better decisions, how to be, I'm going to say, a little bit more aware about what's going on around us, what might happen next, how do we predict that, how do we communicate more effectively so that you understand what I'm trying to say and I understand that you know what I'm trying to say, how we lead, how we follow, and how we're part of a team, and how stress factors, which are many, impact our performance.
Well, one of the things, all of that's fascinating to me because, like I said, when listening to it, I thought, well, this could be about anything. So when we started this conversation, you said, well, I'm currently here training military divers and things like that. So how do you go from the guy who had 8 dives and a near miss to doing what you do and not only just applying it to diving, but to all these other facets of business and just different parts of life that you work in, not just live in, but work in?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is my life. You know, it's one of the criticisms I've got. It's like, do you do anything else? It's like, well, not really. And so, so 2004, 2005 is when I had a near miss. I then started reading up, researching it, doing a lot of self-development, started a part-time self-funded PhD, stopped it 6 years later because it wasn't going anywhere. Started a company about teaching these human factor skills, working in oil and gas. So lots of self-teaching, lots of reading, lots of blog writing, put a book together. Ashley's story, If Only, really privileged to be able to work with Ashley and the dive team and tell the story of Brian's loss. And it's just about trying to stitch all of these ideas together. It is about being able to create an environment where people can learn. And so I use a computer-based simulation about flying a prototype spacecraft. So a team have to work together to solve these problems, and they don't have all of the information. And we intentionally create a bad interface for them to work with. So they don't have these technical skills that they can rely on. They have to be able to communicate. They have to be clear in what they're saying. And then we run effective debriefs, and sometimes they're quite uncomfortable debriefs. We hold a mirror up and we ask difficult questions, and they have to answer the questions. And then the learning is more sticky. So it's not just me as well. So the Human Diver is 10 instructors dotted around the world, and there's 2 more being trained up at the moment, because there is a growing want to learn and apply this bottom up. Organizationally, not so much interest, because it's very difficult to make money out of this. It's a growth mindset that goes with it. So anybody who's interested in learning and improving, they'll pick it up and go, I get this. Those who just want to follow the rules and follow the standards, and it's like, well, it's not written in a standard, therefore it can't be important. You go, it is. It's life skills. And that also means it's really difficult to measure.
Well, and mindset is a space that I work in and have been easing into with helping coach other people. And it is an interesting thing because I'm venturing into digital products and just how people need an instant win. They need to know that you can help them fix something that they can't solve in 30 minutes on their own. And whether that means I do all the research and put it in a nice little PDF package, or it's a mini course or whatever it is, people really want to learn, but they want to learn how they want to learn. And our attention spans are shorter, and our interest in doing the research is less. And so I think that's why things like what you're doing, like your podcast, because you have these blog entries, but then you turn it into audio, which some people have said to me, Well, I don't get a chance to catch your show because whatever, I'm on the road or whatever. I'm like, well, you can listen to it. Like
Yes. Oh, yeah.
you could listen to it while you drive. And so that's the thing. We consume it in so many different ways. And I really think that you speak to the possibilities of profession because you took
Hmm.
something that you had no skills at it, and then now you teach it, and then
Yeah.
you apply it to all these other ways. And so it's, I bet when people say, what do you do? It's like, well, because I feel that way. And it depends on how much I want to have a conversation. I say I host a television show and then that's it. But if I
Yeah.
really want to say, the nonprofit I founded or the things that I try to do to take care of my little corner of the world, it's a different conversation. So what do you say to the people who, well, actually, I'm going to ask you this question. We'll answer it when we come back. But what do you say to the people who have something they really, really love and they're passionate about, and then they have this job that they need, pays the bills, provides health insurance, and then you segue that into something that becomes now maybe your career or a way that you can earn a living at it? Because for me, when my husband passed away and my son was 5, I'm like, how I was a stay-at-home mom. I'm super happy about that. Didn't matter if I failed or succeeded when I wrote my books. I wasn't paying the mortgage. I needed to figure out how to feed my kid, feed my soul, and be home by 3 o'clock every day when he got home from school. And so you can't, for me, I couldn't work an 8 to 5 if I wanted to be home by 3 o'clock. So I just want you to speak to the people when we come back who think,
Yeah, sure.
well, diving is that other thing I do, or whatever it is that other thing I do. But if you could talk about it for an hour, then maybe there's a career path in it for you, even if you're just a step ahead teaching other people. Okay, I set that up. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. Gareth, this is our last segment to talk about all the things I want to talk to you about. And so I was talking in the previous segment about how people have something they love, and you and I could talk about this for an hour or two, right? You wouldn't run out of things to say, things to share. You're smiling the whole time. You're very excited. And so what about the people who have something? Because we're talking about the human factor here,
Yes.
and maybe you could expand upon what that means to you. But the people who really have something that they love, and maybe they're missing an opportunity to take something they love, earn a living at it, and still love it.
Yeah. So you no doubt heard of this term of ikigai, of just this intersection of belief and what makes you passionate and to create the change. And importantly, you can make a little bit of money out of it. And I think one of the hardest bits for me, yes, I have built a business out of this, is what is it people value? What is it that emotionally, what are the feelings that are associated with that? And if you've got a passion about something and it creates a change and you really believe in it, there will be a market out there. The hardest part you will find is turning that into something that somebody else wants, because it's a feeling that they're lacking that you can fill that gap. I'm passionate about knowledge, so knowledge transfer and making diving as safe as it can be. But safety doesn't sell. People don't go away from something. So safety is about going away from harm. They go towards something. So do they get better performing? Do they become a better instructor? Do they have more fun when they go diving? And that's my biggest challenge, is actually, how do I flip a message round? Because the knowledge that's there is really, really powerful. The knowledge that your listeners will have, if it resonates with them and it's really something with them, you can make a business. And there are some really wacky businesses out there. But if it meets a need, go for it. And I would say, people like Jeff Walker, in terms of the product launch formula, go and Google some of these things, because there is a very prescriptive way of, I'm going to say, succeeding, because it's about encapsulating that passion in something that others need and want.
And it is about storytelling. It is about storytelling, because I think that most great businesses have a great story. And sometimes I think those businesses get more focused on advertising what they're selling instead of selling their story, which is not tangible, right? It's not tangible. But it's something that, I tend to buy from people who I believe in, who I like, who I follow, who I care about, even if I've never met them. I feel, or even if maybe it's not them that I care about, but maybe the clients, they've told me their stories. I care about their transformation because that means that I can make that transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that association. And I think my experience is that, you talked about these PDFs to package stuff up. People want a product, which is really odd sometimes, because you said, actually, no, you don't want a product, you want a transformation. And people buy a product thinking the transformation happens. But if you can support those people, and you would talk about coaching as a way of doing that, they buy a product and they go, hey, that's cool. I need some support. Can you help me? Because then it's helping them remain accountable to their dreams. Because if we don't get that immediate sort of dopamine, yeah, we got it, then we sort of quickly fade off. And we need to have people help us and have those habits.
Well, we have just 2 minutes left. We've been talking about the human factor. Can you tell me your 30-second elevator pitch about what the human factor is for you and your business and what it means to you and how you apply it?
Oh, my 30-second pitch
or
is
45. We've got time.
Yeah, how to view the world differently and take action accordingly. We often judge people because of outcomes and bad mistakes, but they are just inheriting often broken systems. And what we want to do is, how does it make sense for somebody to do what they did? Not why, but how did it make sense? Because then we can understand the context, their decision-making, and then we can make improvements going forward. Take action because of that new knowledge.
One of the things I've enjoyed most about this conversation is, for people who have no intention of ever diving, maybe this episode wouldn't appeal to them, but we managed to have a conversation surrounding diving that really was about a whole lot of other things. And I think that's one of the great surprises sometimes in a conversation, and getting to talk to somebody. And if you get enough time and interest to ask the questions. So I encourage people who are watching, when you're having a conversation with somebody and you think they do X, find out their why, because the why is what drives it all. And so I think that this conversation really speaks to that. So people can find your podcast pretty much anywhere. It's called The Human Diver. And like I said, it's a metaphor for life, but it has a lot of good diving information too. And I just have such respect for the work you're doing and making sure it's safe out there for people, but also helping them find their way in other ways that apply to the human factor aside from the human diver.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, it is. I mean, there's a number, 2 or 3 of my instructors now going, I don't see the world the same way now. I look at things and go, yes. And it's like that to me, huge transformation. You just go, oh, that makes me happy.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for the invite, and great to be on here.
Safe travels.